As we move forward this morning, Arica Thornton will be taking us to Washington, D.C., where we're going to look at production of food. Her thesis chair was Ralph Bennett, wrote. On her committee was Carl Vogel, right here, James Cohen, right here, myself. And Arica's one of our dual degree candidates. She's doing a Master of Architecture and a Master of Community Planning. So this thesis, I think, will illustrate the convergence of those two worlds in a very nice way.
Good morning. So the title of my thesis, actually I want to start by thanking my committee for their guidance, my family for their support, especially my husband and daughter who've been incredibly patient in this process. The title of my thesis is Cultivating Community Health, Linking Agriculture and Public Space Through Education.
He's got the USB for the clicker. You don't have to use the mouse for a second.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Wow.
Yeah, I guess it would. Is it in the way though? Yeah. There we go. Oh, okay. So first I would define what is community health. So the CDC states that community health is promoting and improving the healthy lifestyles of residents by addressing their physical, mental, social, and environmental health needs. So when we look at...
That's weird. No extra cost for that.
When we look at health data, we start to see some common trends. So in DC, for example, we tend to see that when you have residents in a community that live in have high poverty rates, you also often see high rates of obesity and high rates of heart disease. And this also correlates and overlaps with food access, as you can imagine, which the city of DC has sought to address. And by putting forth a goal to have every resident within a 5-minute walking radius to fresh food. So I was interested in seeing what is the access to fresh food in DC. So I performed a GIS analysis looking at the 5-minute buffer walking radius to all grocery stores in DC. And what I found was that there are some areas and wards that are extremely lacking in grocery store access. For example, Ward 8 only has one grocery store. And when I looked into this further, I found that this has actually gotten worse over time, not better. So back in 2010, there was 3 grocery stores in Ward 8 with a population of around 7,000 residents, which means there was about 1 store per 23,000 residents. In 2016, we dropped down to only 1 store in Ward 8, so it actually got worse over time. That population increased, so now you're only serving 1 grocery store per 78,500 residents. So this thesis sought to address the aspect of community health through healthy food access. And some of the barriers that I came across through my research in addressing these needs is one, that a lot of times residents in low-income areas do not have the proper kitchen tools in their homes. So even though they might come to a cooking class, they might learn how to cook with food, they might learn about food, they don't have a way to actually prepare the food in their houses. They may not even have salt and pepper. The other is what I call cost to taste. There has been research that has shown that children take about 17 times to try a food before they like it. So for parents with low income, this is a very high cost to bear. And the other is reliability. So a lot of the issues, or a lot of the solutions that people come up with, mobile food trucks, things like that, farmers markets, they're only available seasonally. And so residents, when they go to look for something in the fall or the winter, they have less access to food again. So then they try to go to another option. So I'm going to move into site. So this is the site here. It's along the Anacostia River, and this is the 295 Beltway. It's just south of Navy Yard and the mall. It's up here. And looking in closer, you can see how close it is right to the highway there. The history of the site I find pretty interesting. It actually is linked to agriculture. Captain John Smith had traveled to the area and discovered that the Nanticoke Indians were in this part of DC and had been there. Well, he didn't discover this, but later they discovered they had been there for around 10,000 years or more. They're not even sure how long they've been there for. Oh, thank you. So he drew up this map. And they farmed the land as well. And then later the population changed to European settlers who also farmed land for tobacco.
Sorry.
Fast forward to 1892, and we start to see development of the Anacostia region. So this was a suburban white enclave, that town that was developed, the grid for the Navy Yard development. And this is my site here, which is largely undeveloped. And then, so it still has remained that way today. It's pretty undeveloped. The church, this church here, it used to be in the middle of the property and it burnt down and it's been vacant ever since. The site has, one of the reasons why I chose the site is it has really good access to public transportation. It's a 1/10 of a mile to the Anacostia Metro Station. It's on the DC, in multiple bus lines like the DC Circulator. It's also in a really unique location on this main street. It's the beginning to the commercial corridor, and there's this grouping of institutions that the users of the site could rely on. Like the schools across the street, the children would be able to come and learn from the farm. And there's churches, and then you can see that it starts to be commercial, and then in the back of the site is largely all residential. The soil is moral very complex. I don't know too much about it, but what I learned was that it does have some average runoff issues, so I knew I was going to have to deal with this. The site is quite steep, as you could tell. It has very good solar access because there's really not much around it to block it. The architecture surrounding the site is pretty varied. The school across the street is a historical building. It's one of the first African American public schools in the nation. It's now a charter school. So you get the Italian Renaissance inspired style down to the new library building, and the Queen Anne Victorian style of Frederick Douglass House, as well as a lot of public housing. Berry Farms is right nearby if you're familiar. So with my proposal, I developed these program themes that permeate throughout the site, taking the idea of discovery, exploration, and cultivation, all under this umbrella of urban agriculture. And education weaves throughout all of those elements and provides those opportunities for residents. One of the things I wanted to push with this was the reliability issue. And so I looked into 4-season farming, which they do in Vermont and other areas, in some places in Maryland as well. And so this is just a diagram showing some of the foods and when they are available to residents. And there's a lot of food that is available in the winter through the use of high tunnels so they can grow and keep the soil warm. And the terracing that I've done on the site also helps to keep the plant's roots warm, and also through cold storage. So most of your produce like apples, pears, and potatoes are all provided through cold storage in the winter season. So the site strategies first were to maintain, to prevent runoff issues, which have been historically have been issues in the past. The tobacco farmers didn't protect the land, and all the runoff silted off the river, and that's how we have the line of the Anacostia right now. So I terraced where the farm would be, and I provided planting around the plaza area, as well as green roofs. And the second strategy was to really define a definitive public space and address the street urban front edge. And the third was to make connections through the site and make it accessible to the neighborhood. And so the main program elements are these 4 buildings: the Agricultural Discovery Center, the teaching kitchen, the market, and the nursery school. And then there's these community art pieces that accentuate the access through the market building, and the agriculture sort of accessory buildings that show the access through the kitchen. And so just to show you some before and after photos, this is coming from the west from the Anacostia Metro Station. This is what it looks like now. It's used as a parking lot primarily. And this is what it would look like with my proposal. Looking at the market that would open up to the doors. The market I'm proposing to be more like a co-op or a small neighborhood grocer, but it is flexible. It could become later on an open public space if that's what they needed. People would come here to get food from the farm as well as local dairy, local meats, foods from other farms as well. And the farmer's market could happen here on Saturdays with these LA of Juneberry trees, which are really beautiful because they have, flowers in the spring. They produce this fruit that tastes like blueberries. And then in the fall, they turn this really nice red. This is the view looking into the plaza at the Discovery Gardens, where people walking through the site would see edible plants that they could use in their garden and learn about how to plant those items. They would have a lot of sensory here because it would smell lavenders and sages and thymes, things that look beautiful in your garden but are also edible. Inside the Discovery Center is an exhibition space where we talk about the history of the agriculture in the area, modern agriculture developments, why fresh food is important to you, as well as kids play. There's an indoor kids space and an outdoor covered kids space for the neighborhood residents to come and use the space. And this courtyard, which preserves the existing community art that was just completed last year, overlooks the assembly space and the exhibition space in the building. The teaching kitchen is a place where the community could come to have classes, kids could come to learn, as well as families, and also any residents who have inadequate kitchens. I imagine would come here in the evenings, they could cook together, learn from each other, and share ideas. I've also equipped the back area with a kitchen tool pantry where people could donate items to families who might need certain items like silver kitchen knives. The nursery school, on the site, the idea is to have kids involved in nature, learning how to grow food, take care of food, and put this communal dining space here, which overlooks both the teaching kitchen and the farm in order to accentuate that relationship between agriculture and community. And then moving forward to the orchard walk. So as you come up through the site, you have the option to go straight up to the outdoor classroom through the steps, or take this long winding walk and pick fruit along the way up to the top, where you would get this wonderful view of the DC monument and see the orchard and the farm below. And so, in conclusion, this thesis proposes to provide the community with a place to come and interact, discover, cultivate an appreciation with agriculture, and to hopefully then start a relationship with a larger food network by bringing in farmers' food from at the public market, the farmers market, and be part of that larger network and increase access for residents to healthy food as well as social connections. Thank you. I'd like to open for questions.
Arica's right in there.
Just initially a question. Can you talk a little bit about all the adjacent structures that come up against your site? Just describe what they are.
These ones?
Yeah, all of them.
So this is a neighborhood that's a Bethlehem Baptist church that's been on the site since the 1840s. This is a community building, the Black United Fund. This is, it was a barber shop, it actually also was a small grocer at one time. And people hang out there. There's like a pop-up car wash that goes on there. So this is a nice place where people already gather, so it provides them another space to be besides next to the parking lot.
That is where the graffiti are?
I'm sorry?
That the space is where the graffiti
Yeah,
are.
yeah, this is where the graffiti is.
That-
And so up on the north, those are all single family, sorry.
These, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
these
those
are
the
single
single
family.
And then
These are like town
those
row
are newer
homes.
development.
These are older, and then these are newer developments down here.
Okay.
And then across the street is a school, and are both of those large buildings?
These are both schools, elementary school and high school, and this is also a church. And then that's the metro station.
Well, I'll start off. So again, I want to commend you for what you've done, and you clearly know the site very well. And you've chosen an appropriate place to explore this thesis. And I know the site pretty well. I've done quite a bit of work in the historic district of Anacostia and Congress Heights. And looking at your site plan initially, I thought, well, this is kind of a campus or suburban response, but with a little bit of tweaking, I think it actually is something that realistically could be extremely successful. And what I love about what you've done is you've captured with the farming, the terracing, and then the campus arrangement, you've really captured kind of the history of what's happened to that part of the city from its prehistory as an incredibly fertile place for communities to live, to American communities to live, to its agrarian roots, and to what it is now, and the incredible demand for what you're providing can be. So I think it's a big, looking at it, as an urbanist, I think, oh gosh, there's too much space there. But given that specific site, I think you've really done well. The only thing I would have you consider is a little bit more street edge, given that that's the commercial strip, and there's so much infill, there's so much demand for infill. Maybe the relationship of your main food hall to the street, or there could be a little bit more density in the front than all that open area, but otherwise, I think it's a really successful strategy for this specific site.
Just one question. Maybe you mentioned it, but you have a greenhouse close to the terraces?
Those are movable high tunnels
Okay.
that the farmers could move to different areas on the terrace as needed to rotate the crops.
I really appreciate the analysis of the relationship that your intervention has with the pre-existing building. So the arrangement, the layout, and the context, I think works also with your urban development. So I really appreciate that. One thing about another things that I like, the pavilion, the building that you design, with this, the geometry, of course, that you choose is pretty, appropriate for the vernacular language of the agricultural buildings. I wonder actually if the other building, for example, this is in front of me, that is in your corner, maybe could be worked in terms of material with a more friendly, such as, show up also wooden structure that you can use in the interiors. So maybe it could be used also for external, the canopies, instead of concrete, or so something like that could be more profitable for the area. This is my advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to kind of agree with what's been said so far, I think really making the testing or teaching kitchen much more of a public kind of amenity, and really to allow it to engage with the space around the marketplace, I think would be essential for the whole mission of this. And I guess I would just ask you to really consider, you're addressing an immediate problem. It's a problem that exists now, but what about the future of this neighborhood and this part of the city, being near a metro station, with increased pressure for urbanization? What is the kind of most sustainable model for agriculture within this community going forward? I mean, is it to try and have more concentrated, agricultural entities, or is it something that it's really about educating people so that they can use the space in their front yard or their backyard or in their window gardens, or in so that it becomes like just this kind of place where these ideas and these opportunities are kind of disseminated from, so it reaches out and engages the entire community. Not just that they don't have to come here, but it's really kind of more that educational goal that you say is at the heart of it, I guess. And obviously the farm is beautiful, and it's a clear demonstration of some of the things that you would be teaching people about. But I don't somehow, I question the model that the solution to our food deserts and that our access to fresh food in an urban setting is large plot agriculture. I mean, I'm not sure that that's the answer. So, I don't know if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, I did have that idea about this sort of disseminating out for residents to take home, as well as training for other agriculture, so people could come and do internships. But I have a teaching terrace here where people would come to learn how to garden in their home, and as well as the community garden where they could come and garden themselves if they don't have a space to do it in. I did imagine that this is a solution that's here now, and it could change. It's a pretty wide open space that could be handled later as needs are addressed in different ways.
So did you look at, just to tag on to his point, what type of precedents did you look at in terms of urban farming, especially in a high dense area? I understand, just giving you a site that's a sparse, open lot, but if you're working in an inner city that needs fresh food and whatnot, did you look at other precedents, like European precedents, or stuff that are currently being tried in terms of how to grow fresh foods within a high dense area?
Yeah, I looked at a few. Some of them were in parks within high dense areas, so they had access to land and had similar program aspects, except it was mostly just the farm, the teaching aspect. And I looked at some of the things that they're doing in New York and Brooklyn, for example, with the greenhouses and the microgreens on top of grocery stores. I think those are a way of the future, but right now they're only addressing it through limited foods. So it's lettuce and tomatoes and pea shoots. So you're not really getting things that can provide people with the necessary calories and nutrient density that they need.
Yeah, because I often look at, you've done a great work. I love the project. It's very lyrical. The setting of the buildings, how everything was organized on the site is visit. But aside from the project, just me personally, I've always looked, with a side eye at projects that try to fulfill an urban need in terms of our agriculture, and just wondering, what's the tonnage of food that you think you can yield in a farm like this to serve this catchment area that you're looking at?
I had actually done some research into that a while ago, and I don't recall the numbers, but it's also something that's really hard to look at because it can vary based on the season of the year. But there is a lot of people who are experimenting with what they call a biodynamic farming, where it's really high density crops really close together, and using the things like the terraces and walls to keep them warmer so they can have a longer season and produce more food in a smaller space. And I really thought that the site, that there is really no other public plaza or public space that's really close to the residents, so I thought that this site, even though it did take up a lot of urban land, was providing them with a really important amenity as well.
So I'm going to defend your thesis a little. Well, was your intention is not to provide a major food source?
Right.
It's demonstration, correct?
Yeah, and to sort of start that network and connection.
Well, you
You
didn't-
can't all one of their
You
own.
didn't mention there was only one grocery store in
Yeah.
that area. That's not
Which is
right.
about a mile away. That's a big old.
Yeah,
Why not have it be a food source? You've got this huge terrace garden.
We really do need to use the microphone because
I'm
now
sorry.
we're in competition.
Okay.
And you need to speak directly into it,
No,
and you,
okay.
and you need, still need to use volume.
Okay. I guess to Maria's point, or to Media's point, you've got enough landscape to grow a tremendous amount of food. And so I think there could be an actual commerce part of this where people can actually buy, cultivate their own food. It could be sort of, your garden could be almost a community garden concept, which I've seen some of those in lower income communities where there's a plot of land that's not being used and gets fenced off, and by de facto, I don't know if they get permits or whatever, but it becomes a community garden. So I think having this be a source of food as well as education could be key to its success. Also, I think the fact that you've got a school across the street, both an elementary school and a high school, and you have all this outdoor space, there could be a after-school recreation and education component that's about exercise, but also about food and health, whereby the kids maybe bring those experiences home to their families and generate interest. And I think the key to the success is getting people to come to your teaching kitchen. One last point, I would encourage you to watch a movie called Super Size Me. Have you seen it?
Yeah, no, I like that.
Yeah, well, those who haven't, it's basically, it's a struggle because fast food, but in terms of people working, 12-hour days or 2 jobs, fast food, at McDonald's in particular, which is the study of that movie, can sometimes be less expensive, often less expensive than buying a couple bags of groceries, especially when you get into organic food, which is often more expensive. So this being a food source and an economical food source for the families in the neighborhood, given that the grocery store is a mile away, I think really could be the key to its success.
Yeah, thanks. And so Maria's already stated most of what I was thinking, but I had a couple comments. One, I think it's a beautiful and necessary idea that you've explored here, and I really appreciate the way you articulated it. And I see it less as a thing about producing volumes of food and more about helping to change minds and change a mindset. And I've done a lot of work in Washington, D.C., and Ward 8 is the appropriate place for this. So I think that, highest and best use is an equation that you can argue, should it be economic development, should it be this, should it be that? And I actually think this is a really elegant way to use that space there. And I also want to thank you for hand-drawn on what I think is bum water trace paper. It warms the cockles of my heart. And I guess the rest of the folks that are here that used to use that stuff too. So thanks for your work.
Could you speak a little bit about the Discovery Center?
You can't speak without the microphone.
Sorry.
You need it, too.
I thought
If
my
you go
voice-
sotto voce real
I know.
quick,
I thought
you're going to
my-
speak directly into
I
that.
thought my voice was projecting. Could you talk a little bit about the Discovery Center? Because you only mentioned the exhibition space, but then what exactly, because it's such a large footprint on your site plan, what exactly happens there besides?
Yeah, so in order to, and throughout the process, we had also talked about how would this actually be feasible if this was a nonprofit organization. And so to help offset costs, I provided a semblance community space that can also be flex space at the top on the street. And on the second floor, there's a meeting room space and, I'm sorry, the assembly space is up there, it's open to flow here. And there's a classroom and meeting room space too that people can rent out, or students can come and do homework after school. And then the rest are offices and storage and mechanical space.
It sounds like it has an educational component to it. 'Cause
Yeah.
You're learning. Is that where the learning takes place about what happens and how you know what's nutritious for you and what plants to grow and what time of the year kind of thing.
Yeah, I imagine there'd be like these fun interactive exhibits, kind of like a small nature center environment. But just kind of shown in this view here, so you could have kids and people interacting with.
Sure.
Did you look, so we'll talk about the plan, architecture a little bit. I think it almost doesn't matter what you program there. The programs will change, there will be a retail component to it eventually, but the footprint, I think the fact that you create this footprint with the open space that is dedicated to agriculture is really the strongest move, given that specific site. And so, looking at places like Union Market or other places where people plug in, program, you have pop-up vendors, et cetera, I think that's the strongest piece. And the fact that people are already on that site, they're going to the metro, they're going to the school, there's a lot of foot traffic, and there doesn't exist that kind of public space where people gather in what is essentially the most primary spine of the community in Ward 8. Right now there's this big chair in a parking lot.
Yeah.
So again, it doesn't matter what you program. Over the years, it will change. But the footprint, the DNA of what you're putting in there, I think is
It's a terrific program. I mean, it's such a difficult one. I'm curious from a community health point of view, how do you help people learn how to eat correctly? I'm just curious how you help people how to learn how to eat correctly.
I think the idea and the goal that I was trying to set forth was mainly doing that for the teaching kitchen and providing sort of a social avenue for people. And also, some of the precedents I looked at had these aspects of outdoor classrooms where they had things called farmizations, where people from the community would come and talk to each other about how to cook for long days. So learning slow cooker recipes, because they might work 12 hours and they can't come home and cook after they get home. So they set the slow cooker and come home. So I was imagining this to sort of spur sort of the dialogue between the residents and start to have people interact with each other and share how they can get access to sorry, I lost my question there. But they would get
To the education process,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm sort of looking, it's a combination of you have a really strong social program that you're trying to do. I mean, how to make life better for people and how to enable that. And then you have an architectural program, which is hopefully embraces it or enables it, right? The two of them together. And you have this major street coming here. And I find it interesting that you pull your building back, or your primary building, rather than holding the edge, so that you can start creating a wall against noise, against pollution, against this, and then set up a zone for people, safe zone for education, where people might be able to come in easily. So for me, it's a couple of things. It's how you set up the section through the site, but also using the site to enable your program. So it's the two things. One is how the education works, and then how do you get the architecture to reinforce what you're trying to do. And I find a really beautiful building and series of buildings set up. I'm not really quite sure what the prototype is or the typology of it, but it's a congregation of buildings in terms of composition on one hand, and then on the other hand, I find that you have a very strong social program, and I'm trying to find the right word from your health point of view of how to enable a thing. But I still find a discrepancy. There's one on one side and one on the other. I would love them to be more married. And going further, because I don't think it's right just to leave it open like that.
Do you mean the front edge here?
Yeah, across the whole wall, and then creating the space in the center, and perhaps that's the garden. And the danger about gardens is on your north approach drawing there, is it winds up being like a caulk at the edge of the building where it's just pretty. Whereas in fact what you're trying to do is you're trying to get people engaged, and that's not the most natural thing if you're sitting there presumably in a lower income stratification. you don't really have the luxury in terms of time to go out and smell the roses or to appreciate this. And I don't know, but I think it's an incredible challenge you've taken on, is how do you break that down? How do you make that possible? How do you make that, help people realize how important good nutrition is and enable it, and then help them through the economic challenges. Obviously, if you grow your own, it's going to be less expensive than going to whatever the local upscale organic market. Maybe there's an idea of setting up with community fund small places so small farmers can come in and set up little shops. I'm working with Martha's Table at the moment, doing a thrift shop for them, and it's really interesting because the will's there. In terms of the aspiration. So what we're talking a lot about is how the imagery and the aspirations are put together, not to be too challenging in terms of design, and also worried about the aspiration of creating safe places that talk about respect, talk about dignity, and what does that look like. All of those things are part and parcel of what you're trying to do. And I find it, I like the idea of having like a barn type shape, and a modern one at that, in terms of technology. I wonder how this thing opens up to the community. What's the community face? What's the street face? What's the inside? All of which are sort of next step up. Because I think it's fabulous idea that you're trying to do. I want it to succeed.
Thank you. So here's another question. As part of your pro-thesis, while you're sort of doing the research into this, you sort of, again, just going back to some of the things you talked about when you started, about the fact that there is only one grocery store serving this neighborhood. In your thesis, did you come across the reason why that is? Because you would think, build it and they will come, right? Like you have the populace, you have the catchment area there. Build a grocery store and people would patronize it. Why is that? Why is it through your discovery, is it other reasons outside the physicality that's precluding grocery stores in these, that's creating food deserts, so to speak?
It's a pretty complicated issue.
Sure.
But one of the things I did discover is that they have something called what they call a poverty tax. So it's actually very expensive for grocery stores to operate in these types of environments. There's an extra tax on the food. I read an article from a teenager who lives in Anacostia who was explaining how her mom would travel to like Georgetown to go to a different grocery store because the produce was actually cheaper there than it was in Anacostia, which seems, because I don't remember exactly how that works, but to get the produce delivered, things like that, for some reason it costs the grocery store more, and it's actually usually worse quality food. It's like the ugly food that's left over that gets sent to those areas. So I think it's the operating cost of the grocery store, and then maybe when people go there, they don't see the benefit, maybe the costs are too high, so they're trying to, and then the grocery store doesn't survive.
I wonder if, sort of looking at your project through that prism, through that lens, I wonder how it would have affected not just your program, but how you lay this side out. Because I think this still doesn't negate that problem, right? Your intervention, teaching people how to eat nutritiously, still doesn't bring a grocery store to serve that catchment area. It teaches them how to grow food, but most people aren't going to grow their food. They're still going to go to the grocery store and buy what they need on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And I understand you have a market component to this that could sort of help alleviate some of those needs, but I'm still missing that. I don't know, maybe that wasn't what your investigation was about, but I was hoping to get a little more insight as to how you sort of cure that ill, so to speak.
Yeah, I think I realized early on that part of that is having a lot of people working on solutions. So there's other communities like DC Greens and other organizations that are popping up, and the more that happens, the more there's a network and there's more supply. And it's better to also reduce the food miles and to have this local access to food. It makes the food cheaper as well. So I think I set forth early on that I knew my project wasn't going to solve the problem, but it was going to sort of just help out a little bit. And then, maybe if a grocery store comes to town, the building may no longer be a market, it'll become a farmer's market shed, or instead of being outdoors, it could be indoors.
Yeah, I'll just amplify your point. I think that's the right answer in my opinion. There's no one strategy here. This is a broad calculus. And, you know, the challenges are, it's not just about being able to grow your own food. It's about changing minds across the spectrum, not just the folks that live there, but the retailers and the owners of stores and things like that that are reticent to live there. I don't know, did you research at all the pavilion up at St. E's on the east side? Yeah.
Yeah.
The success of the farmer's market there.
Wait, sorry, what was that?
The pavilion, which is on the east campus, it's the Gateway Pavilion on St. Elizabeth's campus of Martin Luther King. It's near Congress Heights Metro. And there's a farmer's market there, and I was just wondering if you did any research on the success and access there.
I hadn't I hadn't looked into that, the research of the farmer's market there. I've been previously aware of the building and looked at the structure of it.
So, I mean, that's the good news, is that up at the east campus at St. Elizabeth's, that's where all the development's happening, and that will attract eventually.
And that pavilion is going to go away soon. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a temporary structure.
I was working on Friday when I said so. Sorry about the community involved.
Go away, that's, but anyway, that was it's a micro scale version of what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
The programs exist, they've been successful. There's a need for it.
I keep coming back to your teaching kitchen, which I commend you for sort of giving it an imagery and interaction of people of different cultures or people of different ages. I guess I could see, local chefs coming and doing presentations, getting people really excited about preparation of food. I think there's a lot of local high celebrity chefs who like to do community service, like to interact with people other than just the wealthier patrons who can come to their restaurants. So I think this is the key to really changing the way people think. And the fact that it's a community space, it's not focused on classroom, kind of activities. I think you've designed a beautiful community kitchen. And I think that's really commendable and a critical component of the success.
Sorry, one more thing. What does this look like at night when everything shuts down? Because it's such a crucial corner, 100% corner. And, the market closes, nursery school closes, the teaching kitchen closes.
Yeah.
What's keeping this active past 6 p.m.?
That's a good question. I didn't really ever address that, but that's something
I mean, could it be solved with an overlay of additional program type that could, like stores or whatnot, that could sort of keep that active?
Yeah, I mean, we always discussed too, like, you have a pop-up, things come in here, but that's hidden, or maybe could come into the market space as well. And, yeah.
Because you can, if you did a nighttime rendering of that,
Yeah.
the buildings are going to be lit, but it's going to be deserted of people.
Right.
And it's such a crucial corner, like you said, the access to Metro, that I wonder, I keep thinking housing, is there a component of it that has housing that sort of populates, the program, but also keeps it active at night, past 5 p.m.
Right.
Because again, or retail, restaurants or whatnot.
Yeah, the restaurant. That could be an option.
I was going to ask about the alley because I think, in a way, it's a little bit of a distraction. It kind of takes away from the building's ability to interact with the main piazza that or market square that you've kind of developed there. And this whole tradition of the market square with the kind of covered market is really rich. But I think it's a little bit too much single-use building in terms of the nursery school. Could there be something above that? And that's why I was encouraging the teaching kitchen to kind of really engage the marketplace a little bit more. That could even be on a lower level, and then there could be like a greenhouse structure that could link you to the kind of urban farm, so that really thinking on multiple levels and multi-program, and then allowing those things to mix in a more kind of fluid way and providing more engagement with, because it feels a little bit removed from the community, quite frankly, and I think, the danger is that, people don't really feel welcome back in here. They might feel welcome here, but if you really want to engage those people, then I wouldn't put, any kind of artificial barriers, to that access, and really kind of draw them up into that urban farm area in the back, and to another space, because you said, well, there's a lot of space, they can fill it in later, but frankly, I don't think that's, a good answer. Because
sites change.
no, but there's when you build a foundation, there's a huge commitment, and the terracing and that garden in the front is a commitment of resources. So, and this is not a wealthy community, so I think really kind of developing the core of what it is that's going to be, that this thing is going to grow from, and it's going to be the kind of transformative kind of element that's going to kind of energize this part of this commercial corridor. It is so important that I think that's really where you need to invest your energy. You've done a fantastic job with the rest of it. But I think just like a phasing plan almost, that would really say, okay, this is the bare bones of what I really need to do it, and then this is how it could grow over time.
First of all, this view that I have in front of me is amazing. Is also the point that you choose for aerial view perspective, give the sense of the relation between your intervention and the rest of the neighborhood. And also your intervention reminds me a little bit the last one, Expo in Milan. It's called Feeding the Planet. It's the expo that talk about agricultural stuff. I don't know if you never see or never hear. But there is something in common because there is the attention in that expo was not just for the pavilion itself, but also for the public space around that you mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. And I remember in that exhibition, or one exhibition, that the public space was used a lot for flexible space. So before you mentioned the night activity, what is the problem? So that they resolve with not only restaurant, outdoor restaurant in the good season, but also with temporary structure as a market, especially because you work with a seasonal food. I think you should also think about the opportunity for flexible space. Greenhouse could be a solution because it looks like a temporary structure that you can use in the summer or in the winter. So there is a lot of opportunity for you, thanks to your intervention, because it's big enough and brief. The space. I really like the sequences of the public space until the terraces. So there is a great opportunity. I really appreciate your work.
Thank you. I would point out that the back row here would vote for turning the market. The back row here would vote for turning the market into a bar at night meeting. Flexible use, we can do that. I want to thank the committee, especially Jim Cohen, for coming out of retirement. Jim's done important work on food deserts in Prince George's County, and is an important part of this. And Carl, of course, and Brian, thank you for your help. Thanks, too, for the candidate's family. The daughter is otherwise occupied, but the husband is here watching. Arica has been on a long journey here. And what's great about this project is that it combines the analytic discipline of planning with the synthetic art of architecture. And the work she's done to develop and identify the need, which you all have seen. It's ironic that we're making this suggestion on days when the Congress is considering adding a punitive work requirement to food stamps.
So for sensible public policy to be made manifest spatially in a project like this, I don't think it gets any better than that. So thank you, Arica.